He arose with the intense urge to go back to sleep. A memory rings faintly from downstairs. The chime of the landline he always forgets is there was no longer a relic of history. Animated and buzzing, the phone danced on the hook. He knew that only the landline calls came from back home. It's been 5 years since Patchouli moved alone to his family's home in the city. He wondered if it was only his grandfather to remind him of the holidays to come, or to ask him how to use his remote. He threw himself out of bed. His feet were a weight, knocking to every step with a thud. The moment he reached the phone, he prepared himself to hear the cheerful southern drawl of an older man who smoked haze. Instead, Patchouli was faced with a weary, fragile voice, a voice that sounded like it was holding back oceans. A void simply existed on the other line. His Aunt Arnica was that void. Like a house of cards, she collapsed the news of her father's death delicately and without much sound of choking. Like that same house of cards, Patchouli collapsed, quietly sobbing, existing until becoming a void himself. Patchouli doesn't remember the rest of that day, or the days that followed. He only can remember the cold glass of the bus window, the smell of rye, and the mowed grass that filled the air. Nothing like back home, I guess, he thought. At the bus stop waited Arnica, dressed in a black dress and stockings. Today was the day before it. Patchouli chooses to use the words ceremony instead of funeral. It was a small town where everyone knew everyone. You could even count the stoplights on your hand. The townspeople caught wind that Patchouli was back for POTH's funeral. His grandfather was a very well-known and very well-respected herbal researcher. Arnica and Patchouli arrived to a swarmed house. It seemed every mother and child was either holding a balloon or a basket. Arnica rolled down the window to call out to the crowd, only to be cut off by an explanation from the neighborhood busybody. After a wave of saying condolences and accepting grievances, they booked it to the door, slamming the door behind them. A brief moment of peace. That moment was soon over as Arnica pulled out the final will and testament. Patchouli was faced with his inheritance, his childhood home, his grandfather's research, and 3 seeds with blue shells. Arnica received a large amount of money, being his only living child. She reminded Patchouli that money was no longer an issue, that she would do anything to ensure that he stays happy. But money was the farthest thing on his mind. The only thing he could think of was trying to decipher the message his grandfather had obviously left him behind, a puzzle set for him to solve that became immediately clear after every passing word. He walks downstairs to the basement in silence. He dug his fingers into the raised bed soils by the basement windows, planting each seed before spraying every one. He watched his grandfather do this for years. He would grow wonderful things. Him and his grandfather share memories of watching the beauty of the lives of fruit, vegetables, and even flowers. The thought of it makes him tear up. A knock at the door. Then footsteps followed by familiar voices came from upstairs. Arnica seemed to be giving banter to a guest she actually invited in. The sound of 2 voices. Maybe guests. Patchouli walked upstairs and was immediately embraced by his childhood best friends, Agrimony and Valerian POTH. The Poth brothers come from a family line that spans generations in this town. Besides the local governments, the Poth family has been the town's healers and herbalists for over 99 years, having the motto, everything is curable but death. Throughout town's history, Poth family has been regarded for their youthfulness and health. The only eerie thing about the Poth family is that none of them make it past age 49. The brothers Poth talk condolences and say thank you for everything Pachuli's grandfather's research did. Eventually, they invite him out, only to be turned down with the excuse of housework. But the truth is, housework was only the veil he was using to cover up his investigation. In the night, he moused around looking for clues, only to find the seeds incubating in the raised beds, germinated under the moonlight. Eeriness in the night of the smiley small town of Greenside. What's to come once every truth is brought to